Fleet Commander Kale stood before the massive viewing screen on his flagship. Stars stretched endlessly in all directions, but his eyes focused on one small blue planet ahead. Earth, the 18th world that would fall to the Velkhari Empire. He touched the datapad in his hand, reviewing the intelligence reports one more time. The humans were primitive by Velkhari standards. Their fastest ships moved like crawling insects compared to Velkhari vessels. Their weapons barely scratched modern armor plating. Their military formations followed ancient patterns that any first-year tactical student could predict. "Commander," his aide approached with careful steps. "The fleet reports ready for orbital bombardment." Kale nodded without looking away from Earth. In his 300 years of service, he had conquered 17 different worlds. He had fought the insectoid swarms of Kepler 442, whose queens could control millions of soldiers with single thoughts. He had defeated the crystal beings of Proxima Centauri, who moved through solid matter like water and spoke in light frequencies. He had even broken the cybernetic collective of Wolf 359, where every enemy soldier shared the same digital mind. But humans, they seemed almost refreshingly simple. "Begin the bombardment," Kale ordered. "Target their military installations first, their capital cities second. Leave the smaller settlements for ground forces." Red beams lanced down from the Velkhari fleet toward Earth. Explosions bloomed like flowers across the planet's surface. On his tactical display, human military bases disappeared one by one. Their orbital defense platforms died in silent flashes of light. Kyle watched human ships rise from the planet to meet his fleet. They flew in neat formations, just like the intelligence reports predicted. Their commanders seemed to follow the same basic strategies that humans had used for centuries. Attack the flanks, protect the center, concentrate fire on the largest targets. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, twisted metal from human ships drifted through space like leaves in autumn wind. Kyle had lost exactly 3 vessels. The humans had lost everything. "Easier than the crystal beings," his aide commented. "At least they could phase through our shields." Kyle studied the tactical readout. Human resistance had collapsed faster than even his most optimistic projections. Their fleet commanders had made every mistake possible. They had divided their forces. They had fallen for obvious traps. They had even broadcast their orders on frequencies that Velkhari sensors could easily intercept. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender signals from the human capital. Already?" Kale raised an eyebrow. "It's only been 6 hours since we arrived." "Yes, sir. Multiple human governments are requesting terms for surrender." Kale felt a moment of disappointment. Perhaps humans were even weaker than the reports suggested. The insectoid swarms had fought for months before surrendering. The crystal beings had never surrendered at all. They had simply retreated to another dimension. But humans were giving up after a single battle. "Tell them we'll accept surrender after our ground forces secure their major population centers," Kale decided. "Standard occupation protocol." Over the next week, Velkhari ground forces landed on Earth. They met scattered resistance from human military units, but nothing organized. Nothing dangerous. Human soldiers fought bravely enough, but their weapons barely dented Velkhari armor. Their tactics followed predictable patterns. When faced with superior force, they retreated. When surrounded, they surrendered. Kyle toured. Several captured human cities. The primitive architecture amused him. These beings still built with concrete and steel like children playing with blocks. Their technology seemed stuck centuries behind Velkhari development. Their computers were slow, mechanical things. Their energy systems were inefficient and wasteful, but something nagged at him. In every human city, his soldiers reported the same strange phenomenon. The humans they captured seemed calm, not defeated, not broken, but calm, like people waiting for something. "Commander," his intelligence officer approached with a new report. "We've completed analysis of human military doctrine." Cale took the data pad. The report contained exactly what he expected. Human warfare relied on overwhelming firepower, numerical superiority, and brute force tactics. They had no experience fighting technologically superior enemies. Their entire military philosophy assumed they would always have the advantage in equipment and numbers. "Primitive but predictable," Cale murmured. "Like most species at their development level. There is one odd detail, sir." The intelligence officer hesitated. "Human military records show they've spent considerable time studying theoretical scenarios." "What kind of scenarios?" "Asymmetric warfare, insurgency tactics, guerrilla operations against superior forces." The officer paused. "They seem to have extensive theoretical knowledge about fighting enemies with better technology." Kyle frowned. "Theoretical knowledge means nothing without practical experience. Have any humans actually fought this kind of war?" "No, sir. Their recent conflicts have all been between roughly equal powers. But their military academies teach these subjects extensively. They have detailed manuals on improvised weapons, sabotage, techniques, and resistance organization." "Interesting," Kyle said, but he didn't feel worried. Many species studied warfare they had never experienced. It was like studying swimming by reading books. Theory and practice were very different things. 3 weeks after the invasion began, Cale prepared his final report to Velkari High Command. Earth had fallen faster than any previous conquest. Human resistance had crumbled completely. The population showed no signs of organized rebellion. Another successful campaign for the Empire. But as he dictated the report, alerts began flashing on his command console. "Sir," his aide called urgently, "we're receiving reports from Ground Force 7. "What kind of reports?" "Equipment failures, sir. Their transport vehicles have stopped working. Power armor is losing charge faster than normal. Communication systems are experiencing interference." Kyle paused his dictation. "Mechanical failures happen. Have maintenance teams investigate." "Sir, Ground Force 12 is reporting similar problems, and Ground Force 3. Actually," the aide checked his screen. "All ground forces are reporting equipment malfunctions." A cold feeling spread through Cale's chest. In 300 years of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "Show me the pattern of these failures," he ordered. His aide projected a map of Earth onto the main screen. Red dots marked every reported equipment failure. The dots were scattered across the planet, but they followed a clear pattern. They clustered around areas where human populations had retreated underground, areas where his forces had assumed the humans were hiding in defeat. "Sir," another officer called out, "long-range sensors are detecting unusual activity in the asteroid belt." "What kind of activity?" "Unknown, sir. But there are moving objects out there. Objects that weren't there yesterday." Kyle stared at the tactical display. For the first time, since arriving at Earth, he felt uncertain. His easy victory suddenly felt less complete. The calm acceptance he had seen in human prisoners now seemed less like defeat and more like preparation. "Send reconnaissance drones to investigate the asteroid belt," he ordered. "And I want detailed reports on every equipment failure, every single one." As his officers rushed to carry out his orders, Cale found himself studying the image of Earth again. The planet looked the same as when he had arrived. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown continents. But something had changed. Something he couldn't identify yet. Something that made him remember the old Valkyrie saying, "The most dangerous enemy is the one who has nothing left to lose." But that wasn't quite right, Kyle realized. Humans didn't act like people with nothing to lose. They acted like people with a plan. 3 weeks after the invasion, Kyle's confidence began to crack like ice under pressure. The reports came in every day now. Transport convoys vanishing without sending distress signals. Patrol units finding their weapons drained of power. Supply depots where every piece of equipment had mysteriously stopped working overnight. "It's not random," Cale told his senior staff during their morning briefing. "Show me yesterday's incidents." The tactical display lit up with red markers across Earth's surface. Each marker represented a Valkyrie unit that had experienced equipment failures. The pattern made Cale's stomach tight with unease. The failures always happen near areas where humans retreated underground, his intelligence officer reported. But our sensors show no human activity in those locations. "No activity we can detect," Kyle corrected. "There's a difference." Deep beneath the ruins of what had once been Sol, Nara crouched over a collection of Valkyrie equipment pieces. The former human captain had lost her rank when her fleet was destroyed, but she had gained something more valuable. Knowledge. Hand. "Me that power coupling, Tay," she said to the man beside her. Tay passed her the component they had salvaged from a destroyed Valkyrie transport. His fingers were black with alien lubricants, his clothes torn from crawling through wreckage, but his eyes were bright with discovery. "I think I understand how their energy systems work," Tay said. "It's not magic. It's just technology we haven't seen before." Nara connected the power coupling to a human-built analyzer. The device was crude compared to Valkyrie equipment, but it worked. Numbers scrolled across its small screen. "Look at this frequency," she pointed to the display. "Their power cores all resonate at exactly 847.3 terahertz. So our mining equipment back home uses sonic resonators. If we can match that frequency," Nara's smile was sharp as a knife, "we can make their power cores tear themselves apart." Ben looked up from his workstation across the underground chamber. The young communications specialist had been working non-stop for days, surrounded by captured Valkyrie communication devices. "I've got something too," Ben announced. "Their quantum encryption isn't as advanced as they think." Tay wiped his hands on a rag. "Explain it simply. I'm an engineer, not a computer expert." "They're using quantum entanglement for secure communications," Ben said. "But they assume no one else understands quantum physics, so they're not protecting against certain types of interference." "Can you break their codes?" "Better than that," Ben grinned. "I can make them think they're receiving legitimate orders from their own commanders." Above ground, Valkyrie Ground Force 7 was preparing for a routine patrol when their vehicles simply died. Not damaged by weapons, not destroyed by explosives. They just stopped working. The force commander, a veteran, named Thek, climbed out of his transport and stared at the dead machines. Every engine was silent. Every power indicator showed 0. Every electronic system had failed simultaneously. "What happened?" one of his soldiers asked. "I don't know," Thek admitted. "Run full diagnostics." The diagnostics revealed something impossible. Every power core in every vehicle had developed the same catastrophic resonance failure at exactly the same moment. The cores had vibrated themselves into uselessness in a matter of seconds. "Sir," another soldier called out, "I'm picking up movement in that ruined building." Thek raised his weapon and activated his armor's sensors. The building was definitely damaged from the orbital bombardment 3 weeks ago, but something was moving inside. Something trying to stay hidden. "Surround the building," Thek ordered. "Standard search pattern." His squad moved toward the ruins with practiced precision. Velkhari soldiers were trained for urban combat. They knew how to clear buildings and root out hidden enemies. They found nothing. Thek searched every room personally. His sensors detected no life signs, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic signatures from hidden equipment. The building was empty except for debris and broken human furniture, but someone had been there. He was certain of it. "Sir," his communications specialist reported, "I'm getting interference on all frequencies." "What kind of interference?" "Unknown. It's not jamming exactly. More like, someone is broadcasting on our frequencies." Thek felt ice in his veins. "Broadcasting what?" "Command codes, sir. Someone is sending what appears to be legitimate orders from Fleet Command." "Appears to be?" "The encryption is correct. The authentication codes are valid. But the orders don't make sense." Thek reviewed the intercepted transmissions. The messages were definitely formatted like Velkhari military communications. They used proper command protocols. They included correct unit designations and authentication sequences. But they ordered Velkhari forces to patrol areas that intelligence had already confirmed were empty. They requested supply drops to coordinates in the middle of human cities. They contained subtle errors that no real Velkhari commander would make. Someone is trying to confuse our operations, Thek realized. "But sir, how could humans break our quantum encryption?" Thek had no answer for that question. Back in his underground workshop, Bin monitored 17 different Velkhari communication channels simultaneously. The equipment he was using was a mixture of human and Velkhari components, cobbled together from salvaged parts and improvised connections. "How long can you keep this up?" Nara asked. "As long as they keep assuming we're too primitive to understand their technology," Bin replied. "They're not protecting against attacks they think are impossible." Nara watched numbers scroll across Bin's screens. Each number represented a successful intrusion into Velkhari systems. Each intrusion gave them more information about how their enemies operated. "What have you learned?" "Their entire command structure depends on instant communication," Bin explained. "They expect orders to travel from their ships to ground forces in real time. When that communication becomes unreliable, they don't know how to adapt," Nara finished. "Exactly. They've never fought an enemy that could interfere with their communications." Tay looked up from his latest project. A device built from human, mining equipment and Velkhari power components. "How many resonance bombs can we build with our current supplies?" "Maybe 30, Nara calculated. "Enough to disable half their ground vehicles. And if we can capture more Velkhari equipment, then we can build more bombs." The beauty of their plan was its simplicity. Every time the Velkhari lost equipment to resonance failures, that equipment became raw material for building more resonance bombs. Every failure made the next failure easier to achieve. But Nara knew this was just the beginning. The Velkhari would eventually figure out what was happening. They would adapt their technology to defend against resonance attacks. They would change their communication protocols to prevent intrusion. When that happened, humans would need to be ready with new surprises. "Bin," she called out, "how much do we know about Velkhari biology?" "Some. Why?" Because when they fix their technology problems, we'll need to start working on their biological problems. Bin's face went pale. You want to use biological weapons? I want to use everything, Nara said. We can't match their firepower. We can't match their numbers. But we can match their adaptability. Can we? We have to, Nara replied. Because the alternative is extinction. High above Earth's surface, Kale studied the latest reports with growing alarm. Equipment failures were spreading across his ground. Forces like a plague. Communication interference was making coordination nearly impossible, and his reconnaissance drones had detected something disturbing in the asteroid belt. Sir, his aide approached with obvious reluctance. The drones have confirmed unusual activity among the asteroids. Show me. The main screen displayed images from the asteroid belt. At first, Kale saw nothing unusual, just rocks floating in space, the same as always. Then his aide highlighted the anomalies. These asteroids have been moved, the aide explained. Someone has been repositioning them into new orbits. How can you tell? Spectral analysis shows fresh scorch marks from thruster burns. And look at this orbital pattern. Kale studied the display. The repositioned asteroids formed a rough sphere around Earth's solar system. Not a defensive barrier exactly, but something. A pattern that made no sense according to human military doctrine. What are they building out there? Kyle wondered. Aloud. Unknown, sir. But it's definitely artificial. And it's definitely human. Kyle felt the first real fear he had experienced since arriving at Earth. For 3 weeks, he had assumed he was dealing with a defeated enemy. Now he realized he might be dealing with an enemy that was just getting started. Double all security patrols, he ordered. I want full diagnostic scans on every piece of equipment twice daily, and send another reconnaissance squadron to the asteroid belt. Yes, sir. As his aide hurried away, Kyle turned back to the viewing screen. Earth looked the same as always, blue and white and peaceful. But somewhere on that planet, humans were working, planning, building something, and for. The first time in his long military career, Kyle realized he had no idea what his enemy was really capable of. 6 weeks into what should have been a simple occupation, Kale implemented Protocol 7, Advanced Counterinsurgency Operations. It was a comprehensive doctrine developed over centuries of Velkari expansion. It had never failed. Within days, it became clear that humans didn't follow the rules. Sir, his intelligence officer reported during the daily briefing. We've identified 3 major human resistance cells operating in the European sector. Kale studied the tactical map. Red. Zones marked areas of suspected human activity. According to Protocol 7, his forces should establish control points, restrict movement between zones, and systematically eliminate resistance leadership. Begin containment operations, Kale ordered. Standard sweep patterns. Isolate each, cell, and eliminate their command structure. Yes, sir. 2 days later, the operation was a disaster. Velkari forces had moved to contain the first resistance cell, only to find empty tunnels and abandoned equipment. While they searched underground, the second cell attacked supply convoys 50 kilometers away. When forces moved to respond to those attacks, the third cell somehow penetrated Velkari communication networks and began broadcasting false orders. But the worst part wasn't the tactical failures. The worst part was what happened to his soldiers. Show me the medical reports, Kale demanded. His chief medical officer activated a holographic display. Charts and graphs filled the air, showing health statistics for Velkari ground forces. 70% of our soldiers are reporting symptoms of anxiety disorder, the medical officer explained. Sleep disruption, heightened stress responses, inability to concentrate. Combat fatigue is normal in extended operations. This isn't combat fatigue, sir. The symptoms appeared too quickly and too uniformly. We believe the humans are using some kind of psychological warfare. Kyle frowned. What kind of psychological warfare? We're not certain, but we've detected unusual audio frequencies in areas where our troops patrol. Frequencies that seem designed to trigger anxiety responses in Velkhari nervous systems. Deep beneath the ruins of Berlin, Bin adjusted the settings on his latest creation. The device looked like nothing special, a collection of human audio equipment connected to salvaged Velkhari sensors. But it could broadcast precisely tuned sound waves that made Velkhari soldiers uncomfortable without them understanding why. How effective is it? Nara asked. Very effective, Bin replied. Velkhari hearing is more sensitive than ours in certain frequency ranges. I found the exact frequencies that trigger their fight or flight responses. And they can't detect the source? The broadcasts are subsonic, below their conscious hearing threshold. They feel anxious and stressed, but they don't know why. Tay looked up from his workbench where he was assembling something that looked like a metallic flower. That's clever. But psychological warfare won't stop their vehicles or disable their weapons. No, Nara agreed. But it makes their soldiers more likely to make mistakes, and we need them to make mistakes. She walked to a wall covered with diagrams and photographs, pictures of Velkhari equipment, taken from 100 different angles, detailed drawings of alien technology, annotated with human handwriting. We've learned how to disrupt their power systems and communication networks, Nara said. But they're adapting. New power cores with different resonance frequencies. New encryption protocols for their communications. So we adapt too, Tay said. Exactly. But we need to stay ahead of them. We need to attack them in ways they can't predict or defend against. Bin minimized his audio warfare program and opened a new set of files. I've been studying their biological data, blood samples from wounded soldiers, genetic information from their databases. And they're vulnerable to certain Earth microorganisms, not deadly ones, but organisms that can make them sick. Nara felt a cold smile cross her face. How sick? Sick enough to impair their performance. Sick enough to require medical treatment. Sick enough to reduce their operational effectiveness by 30 to 40%. Can we weaponize these organisms? Already done, Bin said. I've modified common Earth bacteria to be more effective against Velkhari physiology. Not lethal, just debilitating. Ty set down his tools. That's biological warfare. Yes, it is. The Geneva Convention doesn't apply to alien invaders, Nara interrupted. They started this war. They chose to invade our planet. They killed billions of our people. We use whatever weapons we have. Tay was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. How do we deploy these bacteria? Air circulation systems, Bin explained. Velkhari ships and bases use atmospheric recycling. If we can introduce the bacteria into their air supply, their entire crew becomes infected within hours, Nara finished. What about their medical technology? Tay asked. Won't they be able to treat the infections? Eventually, Bin admitted. But it will take time for them to identify the organisms and develop treatments. Time we can use to cause more damage. And when they do develop treatments, we modify the bacteria again, create new strains, force them to keep developing new treatments. Nara walked to another section of the wall, where maps of the solar system were covered with red lines and arrows. We're not trying to win a conventional war. We're trying to make conquest too expensive to maintain. 3 days later, Velkari Medical Officer Wren received the first reports of widespread illness among the fleet crews. "Show me the symptoms," Wren requested. His assistant activated a medical display. Fatigue, nausea, respiratory distress, cognitive impairment. No fever, no obvious infection markers in standard blood tests. How many affected? 40% of personnel on ships in Earth orbit. Ground forces seem unaffected so far. Wren studied the data. The pattern of illness was too uniform to be natural, too widespread to be coincidental. This is biological warfare. Sir, someone has introduced a pathogen into our ship environments, something specifically designed to affect Velkari physiology. But our biofilters should prevent any Earth organism from contaminating our atmosphere. Unless someone has modified the organisms to bypass our filters, Wren realized. Show me atmospheric analysis from the affected ships. The data revealed traces of modified Earth bacteria throughout the environmental systems of every ship in orbit. Bacteria that had been genetically altered to survive in Velkari atmospheric conditions and target Velkari biological systems. How sophisticated are these modifications? Wren asked. Very sophisticated, sir. Whoever did this has a deep understanding of both Earth microbiology and Velkari physiology. Wren felt cold certainty settle in his chest. Send an immediate alert to Fleet Command. We're dealing with an enemy that has access to advanced biotechnology. But, sir, humans are supposed to be primitive. Their biological sciences are centuries behind ours. Then we've been given incorrect intelligence, Wren said, because primitive species don't create targeted biological weapons in 6 weeks. On his flagship, Kael reviewed Wren's report with growing alarm. Psychological warfare, biological weapons, technology sabotage. The humans were fighting a war unlike anything in Velkari experience. Sir, his aide approached with another report. We've lost contact with Reconnaissance Squadron 5. Lost contact how? Their ships are still showing on sensors, but they're not responding to communications. They appear to be drifting in the asteroid belt. Kael studied the tactical display. Squadron 5 had been investigating the unusual asteroid formations that humans had created. Now they were silent. Send Squadron 8 to investigate. Yes, sir. And implement biocontainment protocol on all ships. I want complete atmospheric isolation until medical can develop treatments for these bacterial infections. Understood. As his aide departed, Kael turned to the viewing screen. Earth continued its slow rotation, peaceful and blue in the starlight. But he was beginning to understand that appearances could be deceiving. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy he had encountered before. They weren't trying to win battles or capture territory. They were trying to make the war itself impossible to sustain. Every day brought new problems. Equipment failures, communication disruptions, biological attacks, psychological warfare, and, behind it all, Kael sensed a kind of coordination that shouldn't be possible for a defeated species. Sir, his communications officer called out urgently, we're receiving a transmission from the asteroid belt. From Squadron 8? No, sir. From an unknown source. It's on an open frequency, directed at us specifically. Kael felt his chest tighten. Play it. The speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal a human voice speaking accented but clear Velkari. Fleet Commander Kael. This is Captain Nara of the Earth Resistance. We have been monitoring your operations with interest." The bridge fell silent. Every officer turned to stare at the speakers. "We know you believe you have conquered our world," the voice continued. "We know you believe we are defeated. We wanted you to understand that you are incorrect on both counts. We are not the same species you invaded 6 weeks ago. We have been learning, adapting, evolving, and we wanted to give you an opportunity to reconsider your position. Your Squadron 5 is unharmed but immobilized. Consider this a demonstration. We could have destroyed those ships. We chose not to. This time, the transmission ended. Kyle stared at the speakers for a long moment. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Can you trace the source of that transmission?" 6 months after the invasion began, Kyle faced a situation that had no precedent in Velkari military history. His forces controlled Earth's surface, but controlling territory had become meaningless. Every human city his forces occupied cost more resources to maintain than it provided. Every supply depot required massive security investments that drained personnel from other operations. Every piece of equipment his forces captured somehow became a liability within days of acquisition. "Show me the resource expenditure analysis," Kale ordered during his morning briefing. His logistics officer activated a holographic display that made Kale's stomach sink. Red numbers filled the air, showing costs spiraling beyond all projections. "We're spending 4 times our projected resources just to maintain current operations," the logistics officer reported. "Food, fuel, equipment replacements, medical supplies, everything costs more than anticipated." "Why?" "The humans have made normal logistics impossible, sir. They've contaminated our food supplies with organisms that spoil Velkari rations. They've introduced metal-eating bacteria into our fuel systems. They've created electromagnetic interference that forces us to replace communication equipment weekly." Kale studied the numbers with growing disbelief. "How are they doing this?" "We don't know, sir. They appear to have developed new technologies, specifically designed to disrupt our operations. Developed in 6 months? It seems impossible. But the evidence is undeniable." Deep beneath what had once been Tokyo, Nara stood before a wall covered with technical diagrams and photographs. But these weren't just human innovations anymore. Mixed among the Earth-built devices were components that looked distinctly alien. "Show me the latest acquisitions," she told Tay. Tay gestured to a workbench covered with strange devices. "These are from the Kepler 442 system, insectoid hive mind technology. We've adapted their biocommunication systems to coordinate our resistance cells across the planet. And these?" Nara pointed to another collection of equipment. "Crystal technology from Proxima Centauri. We've learned to phase shift our equipment through solid matter, just like the crystal beings did. Velkari sensors can't detect our hidden bases anymore." Ben looked up from his workstation, where screens displayed data from across the galaxy. "I've been in contact with resistance groups on 14 different worlds." Nara felt pride and amazement in equal measure. 14? The Cybernetic Collective from Wolf 359 taught us quantum networking protocols. We can communicate instantly, across interstellar distances now. Every world the Velkari have conquered is sharing information about their weaknesses. What have we learned? That humans aren't the first species to figure out adaptive resistance, Ben said. But we're the first to teach it to others. On his workbench, Tay had assembled what looked like a metallic spider with crystal legs and insectoid sensors. This little beauty combines technologies from 3 different conquered species. It can phase through Valkyrie hull armor, locate their ship's power core, and deliver a payload that makes their engines think they're receiving conflicting navigation commands. How many can we build? With our current resources, maybe 100. But if we can capture more Valkyrie equipment, we can build more. Nara completed the familiar refrain. Every loss the Valkyrie suffered became raw material for new attacks. It was a cycle that fed on itself, growing stronger with each iteration. "Ma'am," a young resistance fighter approached with obvious excitement. "We've received responses from the other conquered worlds." "What kind of responses?" "They want to learn our methods. The species from Kepler 442 are particularly interested in our biological warfare techniques. The crystal beings want to know how we've adapted their phase-shifting technology." Nara felt a moment of vertigo. 6 months ago, she had been a simple fleet captain fighting a hopeless battle against superior technology. Now she was apparently teaching military strategy to species across the galaxy. "Set up training exchanges," she decided. "We teach them our innovations. They teach us theirs." "Ma'am, some of these species have been under Valkyrie occupation for decades. They have technologies and knowledge we can't even imagine." "Then we learn to imagine them," Nara said. "Because the Valkyrie have to fight every war they've ever started, all at the same time." Aboard his flagship, Kale reviewed reports that read like science fiction. Technological innovations appearing on multiple worlds simultaneously. Resistance, movements that seemed to coordinate across impossible distances. Equipment failures that followed patterns no single species could have developed alone. "Sir," his intelligence officer approached with obvious reluctance, "we've detected unusual activity on 7 different conquered worlds." "What kind of activity?" "Equipment failures identical to those we're experiencing here. Communication disruptions using the same methods. Biological attacks targeting Valkyrie physiology with modifications that appear to have originated on Earth." Kyle felt reality shifting around him. "That's impossible." "Yes, sir. But it's happening anyway. How could Earth-based resistance movements coordinate with species we conquered decades ago? We believe the humans have somehow established faster-than-light communication networks using technologies from multiple conquered species." Kale stared at the tactical display. Red warning markers had appeared on 7 different star systems. 7 worlds that had been pacified and stable for years were suddenly experiencing coordinated resistance. "They're not just fighting us," Kyle realized. "They're teaching others to fight us." "It appears so, sir. But humans didn't have faster-than-light communication 6 months ago." "No, sir. But they do now." Kyle turned to his communications officer. "Have we been able to intercept any of these transmissions?" "No, sir. They're using quantum entanglement networks that shouldn't be possible with Earth technology." "Shouldn't be possible with any technology we know about," the intelligence officer corrected. "We think they've combined innovations from multiple species to create something entirely new." Kale felt a headache building behind his eyes. "Show me the progression analysis." The main screen displayed a timeline of technological developments on Earth since the invasion began. What Kale saw made no sense according to everything he knew about technological advancement. "They've advanced their technology by centuries. In 6 months," he said. "Not advanced, sir. Integrated. They've taken pieces of technology from every species we've conquered and found ways to make them work together. That should be impossible." "Apparently not, sir." Kale studied the display more carefully. The progression wasn't random. Each technological leap built on the previous one, creating capabilities that no single species had achieved alone. They're not just adapting, Kale said. They're evolving. Sir, look at the pattern. They don't just learn new technologies. They improve them, combine them, create hybrid systems that work better than the originals. But, sir, that would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have never met. Unless they have met, Kyle said. Unless the humans are facilitating meetings between all the species we've conquered. The implications hit him like a physical blow. If humans had established communication networks between conquered worlds, if they were teaching resistance techniques to species across the galaxy, if they were creating hybrid technologies that combined the best innovations from multiple civilizations. Sir? His aide approached with another report. Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures from the asteroid belt. What kind of energy signatures? Unknown, sir, but the power levels are increasing exponentially. Kale turned to the viewing screen. The asteroid belt looked the same as always, just rocks floating in space. But his instruments were telling a different story. Send a full reconnaissance squadron to investigate. Sir, we've already lost 2 squadrons investigating the asteroid belt. Then send a full battle group. I want to know what they're building out there. Yes, sir. As his aide departed, Kyle remained staring at the screen. Somewhere in that collection of rocks, humans were constructing something. Something that required enormous amounts of energy. Something that his previous reconnaissance missions had failed to report back about. Sir, his communications officer called out. We're receiving another transmission from the human resistance. Kale's chest tightened. Play it. The speakers crackled to life with the now familiar voice of Captain Nara, Fleet Commander Kale. We trust you have noticed the changes in your strategic situation. Your forces now face resistance on 8 different worlds. Your supply lines are compromised across 17 star systems. Your technological advantages are diminishing daily. We wanted to offer you a choice. Kyle felt cold certainty settle in his chest. You can continue this war and watch your empire collapse as every species you have conquered learns to fight the way we fight. Or you can withdraw from Earth and negotiate a general peace treaty. You have 72 hours to decide. The transmission ended. Kale stared at the speakers in silence. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, but for the first time in his military career, Kale had no idea what orders to give. Sir, his aide prompted. Get me a direct priority channel to High Command, Kale said finally. I need to speak with the Supreme Council. What should I tell them the priority level is? 1 year after the invasion began, Kale received orders that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Achieve total victory within 30 days or begin withdrawal procedures. Show me the current tactical situation, he ordered his senior staff. The holographic display that materialized around the conference table looked like a nightmare. Red warning indicators covered 17 different star systems. Supply lines were marked as compromised or severed across half the Velkari Empire. Resource expenditure numbers had reached levels that threatened the economic stability of their entire civilization. The Supreme Council has been very clear, his aide reported with obvious nervousness. Either we end this war decisively, or we end it completely. And if we choose withdrawal, full withdrawal from all conquered territories. The resistance movements have made it clear that partial withdrawal is unacceptable. Kyle studied the tactical display. In 12 months, a simple planetary conquest had somehow become an existential threat to his entire civilization. It defied everything he understood about warfare, logistics, and the nature of technological advancement. Sir, his communications officer interrupted. We're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's the human resistance leader requesting a personal meeting. Captain Nara? Yes, sir. She says she wants to discuss terms for ending the conflict. Kyle felt a mixture of curiosity and dread. Where does she want to meet? She's proposing neutral ground. The abandoned space station in Earth's L4 Lagrange point. That station was destroyed in our initial bombardment. Apparently not, sir. Our sensors show it's been rebuilt and significantly expanded. Kyle made a decision that would have horrified his younger self. Tell her I accept. I'll meet with her in 6 hours. Sir, this could be a trap. Everything about this war has been a trap, Kale replied. At least this way I might understand what kind of trap it is. The space station that Kale's shuttle approached bore little resemblance to the primitive human construction that had once occupied this position. The rebuilt station was a hybrid of technologies from multiple species, a gleaming testament to impossible cooperation. Kale recognized Velkari hull, plating integrated with crystal formations that could only have come from Proxima Centauri, insectoid. Biomechanical components were seamlessly merged with what appeared to be cybernetic interfaces. The entire structure pulsed with energy patterns that his sensors couldn't fully analyze. This should be impossible, his pilot muttered. So should most things that have happened in the past year. Kyle replied. The docking bay that received his shuttle was clearly designed to accommodate vessels from multiple species. Kale saw attachment points for ship types he had conquered decades ago alongside innovative configurations he had never seen before. Captain Nara was waiting for him in the station's central chamber. The human looked different than in the intelligence photos from a year ago. Thinner, more intense, with scars that spoke of close encounters with Velkari technology. But her eyes held a confidence that made Kale deeply uncomfortable. Fleet Commander. Kyle, she said in perfect Velkari. Thank you for coming. Captain Nara. I must admit I'm curious about your terms. Please, sit. She gestured to chairs that had been arranged around a circular table. Before we discuss terms, I thought you might like to understand what you've been fighting. I've been fighting human resistance forces. No, Nara said. You've been fighting something much more dangerous than that. She activated a holographic projector in the center of the table. The display showed Earth as it had appeared 1 year ago. A single blue planet with primitive technology and scattered human populations. This is what you invaded, Nara explained. A species that had never faced technologically superior enemies. A species that had never needed to adapt rapidly to survive. The display changed, showing Earth as it appeared now. The planet was surrounded by a complex network of space stations, defense platforms, and what appeared to be mobile habitats. Energy patterns indicated technological activity far beyond anything humans should have been capable of. This is what you created, Nara continued. A species that learned adaptation from 17 different conquered civilizations. A species that combined the best innovations from across your empire into something entirely new. Kale stared at the display. This level of technological advancement should have taken centuries. For a normal species, yes. But you didn't conquer a normal species. You conquered a species that specializes in learning from others. What do you mean? Nara smiled, and Kyle saw something in her expression that chilled him. Let me show you what humans are capable of when we stop pretending to be the same species we were yesterday. She pressed a control, and the holographic display changed again. This time it showed Nara herself, but the image was clearly from several months ago. The earlier version of Nara looked completely human. "This is me 6 months ago," she explained. "Purely human genetics, human brain patterns, human limitations." The display changed to show recent scans of Nara's physiology. Kyle felt his breath catch in his throat. "This is me now," Nara said. "Integrated cybernetic interfaces from Wolf 359. Biomechanical enhancements based on Kepler 442 hive mind technology. Crystalline neural amplifiers from Proxima Centauri. And genetic modifications that allow me to process information at superhuman speeds. You've modified yourself?" "We've evolved ourselves," Nara corrected. "Deliberately, systematically, all of us." She gestured around the space station. "Every human you've encountered in the past 6 months has been similarly enhanced. We don't just use alien technology. We integrate it into our own bodies and minds." Kyle felt reality shifting around him again. "That's impossible. Species don't evolve that quickly." "Species that want to survive do," Nara replied. "You taught us that survival requires adaptation, so we adapted. But the risks, the genetic instability, the psychological effects are acceptable," Nara said, "because the alternative is extinction." She activated another display, this one showing population statistics that made Kale's blood run cold. 90% of the human population has undergone some form of technological integration, Nara explained. 40% have received genetic modifications. 20% have completely hybrid nervous systems that process information using both biological and artificial intelligence. You've turned yourselves into machines. We've turned ourselves into whatever we need to be to win this war. Kale stared at the numbers, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. Your entire species has voluntarily undergone massive genetic and technological modification in the space of 1 year? Our entire species voted to do whatever was necessary to survive, Nara corrected. The modifications were just the most effective method. But surely some humans refused. None, Nara said. Because we explained the consequences of failure very clearly. Kyle felt a chill deeper than anything he had experienced in 3 centuries of life. What kind of species does that? A species that understands what you represent, Nara replied. You've conquered 17 different civilizations, enslaved entire worlds, destroyed countless cultures. You represent the end of diversity in the galaxy. We represent order, stability, peace through unity. You represent stagnation, Nara said. The end of innovation, the end of growth, the end of everything that makes life worth living. She leaned forward across the table. But you've made a mistake. You assumed that conquest was permanent, that adaptation was limited, that species couldn't change themselves fast enough to escape your control. You were wrong. Kale looked at this modified human and realized he was facing something unprecedented in galactic history. Not just resistance to conquest, but evolution in response to conquest. A species that could literally remake itself faster than any empire, could adapt to control it. What are your terms? He asked. Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, Nara said. Reparations for the civilizations you've destroyed, and permanent restrictions on Valkyrie expansion. And if we refuse, then you'll watch your empire collapse as every species you've conquered learns to evolve the way we have. Kyle studied her expression, looking for signs of bluffing or exaggeration. He found none. You're serious? We've already established evolution centers on 12 different worlds, Nara said. Facilities where conquered species can undergo the same modifications we have, the same technological integration, the same genetic enhancements. Within 5 years, every world in your empire will contain evolved populations that you cannot control. Within 10 years, your own population will begin demanding the same modifications. Within 20 years, the Velkhari Empire will either evolve or dissolve. You're talking about the end of our civilization. We're talking about the beginning of something better, Nara corrected. A galaxy where every species can reach its full potential instead of being trapped in static hierarchies. Kyle was quiet for a long moment, processing implications that stretched far beyond military strategy. Your transformation? Was it worth it? He asked, finally. Nara considered the question. I can process information 1,000 times faster than I could a year ago. I can interface directly with any technology in the galaxy. I can communicate instantly with enhanced humans across interstellar distances.